Are you into tabletop role-playing games like Dungeons & Dragons, Pathfinder, and Monster of the Week? Sweet. Roll with me. Welcome to Roll With Me. My name is Michael, and I have been absolutely captivated by tabletop role-playing games for the better part of my life. And I'm not a nerd, you're a nerd! Last week, I made a huge fuss about why Monster of the Week is my favorite tabletop role-playing game because it's simpler and more streamlined, and there's less rules than D&D. And this week, we're gonna get really complex and build a zany character in 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. But before we get into that, I'd like to take a second and thank my sponsors, those who make this happen. Jetpack Comics and Games in Rochester, New Hampshire is the coolest comic book shop I have ever set foot in, and I've been in a lot of comic book shops. They have everything you could ever possibly want, from Dungeons & Dragons materials, all the tabletop role-playing games like Pathfinder and Numenera and Monster of the Week. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, great game. Play it. Just do it. They've got pop vinyl figures, action figures, and comic books, and trade paperbacks, and everything you could ever possibly want out of the world's greatest comic book megastore. So give them a call at 603-330-X-Men, or visit them at jetpackcomics.com. And while you're looking for super cool gaming accessories, why don't you check out my website at www.mosfacustoms.com. We make all sorts of super cool stuff like these wooden dice boxes, and we're working on some dice bags and Magic the Gathering deck boxes and all these things. I made this little functional wall art that's hanging out behind me. Lots of fun, nerdy, esoteric stuff. Okay, I'm really excited about this one, so we're just going to dive in here. One of my favorite things about Dungeons & Dragons, or any tabletop role-playing game for that matter, or any role-playing game for that matter, is building characters. I can't tell you how many times I've started a Skyrim campaign just to make the character and play the first 10, 15 minutes and then just start over and make another character. I have a lot of Skyrim characters. It's kind of a problem. In fact, the reason I first caved and got the paid subscription to D&D Beyond was so I could have unlimited character slots to build, because I just have a lot of fun creating weird or interesting or min-maxed or super powerful or super character-driven characters. So this week, I thought I'd take for a spin a character that actually my cousin Andrew, who somehow is a much nerdier nerd than I am. I didn't know that it was possible to pass the apex of nerdiness that lives in my heart, but I think my cousin does a really great job doing exactly that. Now, Andrew didn't name this character, which is an absolute shame, because that's one of the best parts of making a character. I think for the purposes of this episode, we will call him Zippy Short Poppins. Now, Zippy is a Gish. Gish? 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 Gish. That is a word that I did not know the definition of until 2 days ago when I asked my cousin why he wrote that strange 4-letter word. A Gish is apparently a magic user who infuses him or herself and their weapons with magic to buff themselves for battle. And to that end, Zippy's gonna be a real fun character. Zippy has some pretty fun qualities about him and his character that would make him a lot of fun to play. One of those being he will almost always be mounted. And let's get into that. We'll get into that later. I'm all over the place. Let's just dive in. Let's start at level 1. We're going to go from level 1 to level 7 and have at it. Alright, so starting with race. I know, racist. we're going to pick a Lightfoot Halfling for this build. Now, you get your +2 to Dexterity, which makes you a little harder to hit, and you get a +1 to Charisma, which is going to make it easier for you to hit back, and we'll get into why in just a second. Man, I feel like I'm always saying we'll get into it later in this show. Maybe I should learn how to format episodes. So choosing a Lightfoot Halfling gives us a couple of really awesome features, one of which is the Lucky feat, which is pretty much the greatest feat in the game, and if you haven't played a Halfling, be careful, because when you do, you will probably never ever play anything other than a Halfling ever again, because Lucky is an automatic feat that you get that lets you re-roll a d20 when you get a nat 1. Just for free. You get a nat 1, automatic failure? Nope. You get to roll again. Just because you're a Halfling, and I guess Frodo is lucky? Now you also get the Brave feat, which doesn't really do too much if you're on a mount, because your mount can still get scared and your bravery doesn't extend to your mount. That would be pretty wild if it did, though. But we also get Halfling Nimbleness, which we also won't use. On a very real note, though, Halflings are naturally stealthy, which allows them to hide behind or under or around any creature that is at least one size larger than they are. Meaning, while we're riding the back of some sort of medium-sized creature, we can hide on its back. Or, like, kind of hide under it or on the side. It's just gonna be zany. For our languages, we get Common and Halfling, and Halfling's kind of useless in Dungeons and Dragons because nobody really uses Halfling. It's kind of a weak language. But I suppose that important languages are only really made important by the campaign setting or the module that we're playing or the world that we're in. Like, if you're in a world of Halflings and everybody speaks Halfling and nobody speaks Common, Halfling's a cool language. Choose any background. It doesn't make a huge difference for this kind of character. We chose Folk Hero because it gives us the skill of animal handling, which seems appropriate for a mounted little dude. And who doesn't love some rustic hospitality? What's that? Oh, why yes, I would love some tea and also some brandy and a free meal and a room and 3 of your finest women. That would be lovely. On the house? Now, it should be noted that this build is Adventurer League compliant. This is totally fair game. It's only using the player's handbook, and eventually we'll dive into Xanathar's Guide to Everything. So we're in the clear. It's all rules as written. Have at it. Now, kicking off at level 1, we'll be starting as a Warlock. And you'll understand in just a minute. It's about to get weird. Okay, let's get into equipment. The nitty-gritty, boring part of character building. It's fine. It's gonna be fine. So for this build, we prefer a component pouch rather than an arcane focus. It's gonna free up one of our hands a little bit. We can just have our components riding along us, or in like a saddlebag on our mount, whatever that ends up being. Alright, so we're going to pick up a spear for our simple melee weapon, a shield, a long sword, and some medium armor. Our starting gold is going to be around 110 gold pieces, the average of 44 times 10 for our starting wealth, and then our 10 extra gold pieces from our folk hero background. Component pouch, scale mail, longsword, shield, that leaves us about 15 gold pieces left for adventuring gear. A Dungeoneer's pack is 12 gold pieces, leaving us with 3, a paltry sum. Now it's time for us to keep our eyes open for a pony and a lance. Okay, here's the build. We're not starting with just any Warlock. We're going Hexblade Warlock because, obviously. Hexblade Warlocks use Charisma to hit with their special Hexblade packed weapon, and that's kind of a big deal when Charisma is also your casting stat, and probably the one you're gonna max out when you build this character. For our skills, we took Deception and History. Deception because it is an exceedingly important skill in this game, especially if you're planning on doing a lot of role-playing and actually talking to characters and maybe pulling some wild stunts and goofs. And History because halflings, man, they love lore. The expanded spell list is super duper useful. Smite spells are what they are. They kind of eat up your concentration. We're not going to use them a lot, but it is a great thing to have just to have Shield. Shield is a super useful spell that always works in a pinch, and it is just... it's a real good one. Just, you gotta take it. Hexblade's Curse, always super duper useful for the big fight of the day, big boss fights, or, you know, fuck it, throw it at some shambling mound or something. But really, guys... we all know why we're here. It's the Hex Warrior feature. This is what allows us to use Charisma instead of Strength or Dexterity to hit. And here's where it gets funky. Both a Lance and a Longsword would work with this feature. Longswords you can use two-handed, swinging them, using Charisma. And the Lances, technically, while you are mounted, are a one-handed weapon, making them qualify to be your packed weapon. For our cantrips, we took Prestidigitation and Toll the Dead. Now, Andrew and I disagree here. I would take Eldritch Blast because I pick Warlocks for Eldritch Blast, because Eldritch Blast is the most Eldritch Blastiest cantrip in the whole Eldritch Blastin' world. It's awesome, and when you get the Eldritch Invocations later on to power it up, it is a super ridiculously powered, just fuck off cantrip that you can use to deal massive amounts of damage, throw people in the air, fucking make it turn colors, teleport people, all sorts of crazy wild eldritch blasty blast stuff. But Andrew doesn't plan to continue being a warlock for much longer after level 1, so he doesn't really find it necessary. Now for our first level spell, we took Hex, because obviously we're a Hexblade fucking warlock. I mean, obviously I'm gonna pick... Andrew, I know! We're obviously picking Hex, dude! I get it! Anyway, at this point, at level 1, we're a pretty standard Hexblade warlock. Going sword and board without battle preparation is really not gonna do it for us, but once we've spent our first level spell slot on Hex, then it's time to pick up our shield and sword and go to town. If we already have a dog or a pony to ride on, then we're doing what we're supposed to. Here's where it gets fun. Level 2, we're taking a level of Bard. Now, before I get into Andrew's description, Bard locks are one of my favorite combinations in any role-playing game in which you can multi-class. The advantage of a Bard lock is Bards have a ton of spell slots. Warlocks don't. But Warlocks have very powerful spells, and Bards don't. However, Bard locks have very powerful spells, and a lot of slots in which to expend them. For our tool, we took a horn, because it is a one-handed instrument that we can hold into one hand, and if we're riding on a dog or pony for a literal dog and or pony show, we can play one-handed holding onto the reins of the adorable scruff of a good boy. My dog isn't even in this trailer. I'm losing my mind. For our skill, we took Perception, because it's entirely useful, always, in this game. It's just the most useful, most often used skill in this whole game, and I don't understand why some parties can go and play and just not have a single person trained in Perception. They miss everything. Everything! Bards also have one of the most useful features in the game, and that's Bardic Inspiration. Super, super awesome. It's one of the most useful things you can possibly have in this game. It's fudging anybody's role by singing to them. When you remember you can do that. I have been very guilty of forgetting that I can do that. You also get ritual casting, and rituals are awesome. They're really great. Ritual casting is super, super useful. Look up ritual casting. I'm sure there are YouTubers that have like hour-and-a-half long episodes about ritual casting and why it's fucking awesome. For our cantrips, we took Light, always helpful, and Friends. Andrew really likes Friends. Don't hurt Andrew's feelings. For our first level spells, we took Fairy Fire, Comprehend Languages, Healing Word, and Detect Magic. Now our tactics are pretty much still the same. At this point, I really hope you found some scale mail. I mean, it's not that hard. Now, as we level up, we are going right up the Bard ladder. Level 2 in Bard gives us Jack of all trades, which is incredibly useful, super fantastic, and something that I wish every character of mine ever had. It is inarguably one of the greatest aspects of being a bard. It is one of the greatest aspects of Dungeons and Dragons if you're trying to be a skill monkey. And you can try to argue, but you will be wrong, and I won't hear it, and neither will Andrew. Now, Bard level 2 also gives us Song of Rest, and who doesn't love extra healing during short rests? Super great. For our first level spell, we took Featherfall, because when you need it, you will be very glad you have it. Our tactics in this character of Zippy, they remain the same. Hopefully we have that pony by now. Leveling up, we keep climbing up that Bard ladder. Taking that third level in Bard really opens things up for us, magically speaking, and giving us a little more of a palette to draw from and play with. We get bonus proficiencies. We took Performance, Persuasion, and Stealth, a couple of useful charisma skills, and we are charismatic. Zippy is a charismatic dude with his eldritchness and his bardiness. Bardlocks are really useful if you want to be the key speaker or the face of your party. We also get Cutting Words, which is awesome. Being able to affect the outcome of a damage roll by saying shit. It also gives us Expertise. We took Expertise in Perception and Stealth. Again, Perception, one of the most important skills in the game. And yes, Stealth is good. Sneaky, hide. You get it, right? For our second level spell, we took Blindness and Deafness. Yes, it's a save or suck spell, but it's very useful. It also only has a verbal component, so it can be cast while both of our hands have weapons or we're holding onto the reins of our adorable little papa. Again, I'd just like to state that my dog is still not in this trailer, and I was talking to the air. Send help. Level 5, we take that fourth level in Bard. This gives us a feat, and we're going to take Warcaster, because across the board, Warcaster is almost required if you want to be any kind of spellcaster who anybody takes any kind of seriously. Now we also took Lesser Restoration for our second level spell here in this level. It's another one of those that you're just going to be really glad you have when the moment arises that you realize you need it. Around this level, this is where we're starting to reach our tactical stride. With Warcaster, we can now have our packed weapon and our reins or our shield riding on our mount, casting spells with both of our hands full. And that's very useful. Okay, things are starting to get a little crunchy. Our Bardlock of lore is starting to get a little more interesting here. This is where our Cutting Words starts to be a little more beefy, and our Bardic Inspiration gets to be a little more beefy. The Font of Inspiration is insane. We can use Cutting Words with reckless abandon and continue to just hack away at these dice rolls that are being made against us, and it is, woo, nice. For our third level spell, we are taking Enemies Abound, because who doesn't love just sowing chaos in the enemy ranks? It is, oh boy, it's just a lot of fun to watch, and it makes the DM scratch their head and get miffed. Now, as we feel ourselves maybe approaching level up territory at the end of this level, as we're getting closer to level 7, maybe it's time to sell our pony, or our mastiff or whatever we're using as a mount. You know, maybe it's time to find him a new home. And we do this because once we reach level 7, we're going to take the spell Find Steed. You want to summon your mount anywhere at any time? I thought you might. So Zippy is going to take this spell, and he's just going to summon him a big fluffy... I gotta stop. In the middle of a dungeon? No problem. Find Steed. Out in the woods? No problem. Find Steed. In a castle? No problem. Find Steed. In the brothel upstairs with all the women? You want to impress him with an adorable dog? Find Steed! We also get Counter Charm, which fucking blows. Okay, but really, let's dive into these additional magical secrets. We're taking Find Steed because, obviously, because this is where our movement comes from. This is the whole kit and caboodle of the build itself. This is our literal dog and or pony show. You find your steed, and it's magical, and goddamn, it just buffs our character out like crazy. We're also taking Counterspell, which, unlike Counter Charm, does not blow. A very honorable mention goes to Zephyr Strike, which, when you cast it on yourself, also applies to your found steed, which unhinders both of your movements and keeps you both safe from area of effect spells. That's the build. That's Zippy Short Poppins riding in on a big old adorable fluffball dog that is immune to area of effect spells and runs unhindered through magical waves of magic and uses a lance that is invoked with eldritch powers, and you cast spells on yourself and you cast spells on your animal, and goddamn, what a fun, zany, wild ride it has been to understand this character. So if you want a super fun build that isn't terribly complex and only really utilizes 2 books, that being the Player's Handbook and Xanathar's Guide to Everything, still staying Adventure League compliant, give Zippy Short Poppins a spin and see how your party reacts to a zany little halfling riding in on a big steed with lots of magic and boy, just lots of fun and buffs. And it should also be noted that there were not any DPR calculations in this build. This is not min-max. This is not built for specific powers. This is not built to be a tank or any kind of super powerful combat character. This is just for fun and kicks and giggles, and I think anybody who plays a character like Zippy Short Poppins will have an absolute blast in their game. And that's all I got for today. Thank you so much for watching or listening if you're on a podcast streaming service. Remember to like, rate, share, subscribe, comment, tell me how much you love Zippy Short Poppins. Don't say any mean things, because Andrew worked really hard on this build, and I hope that I did it justice for him. Special thanks to my cousin Andrew, who, again, awesome, super great nerd of nerddom, and has taught me a lot about this game himself. So, like, rate, share, comment, and check out my website, and buy the merch, and yeah, see you next time.